Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. I was having some technical difficulties. We're all set. Hi. Hi. I think there's one or two more people joining, so we'll give them a minute or two.
Hey, team. Jasmine, did you get my my email?
I did. Yeah. So we will. No problem. We'll discuss further along in the agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, I just didn't know how to address it, so I was like, well, I'm send it to her. Thanks.
I gotcha.
Cool.
We're still waiting, I think, on one or two more people. So wait a minute or two.
Should we assume that if we didn't get a note around the Pledge of Allegiance, that we're not the Pledge of Allegiance person for that?
So I emailed Shayla. I told her we were going to do a redo this time, so she's going to do it. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to put the Pledge of Allegiance up there, so it's a lot easier. It'll take off, the nervousness.
Yeah, I was like, I need to make sure I'm prepared if that.
I get it. Yeah, I figured I would do my part and just share it on the screen, so that way it's a bit easier. Okay, let's get started. So welcome everyone to the July 27th Social Justice Task Force meeting. I will call the meeting to order. I did want to apologize to Shayla for putting her on the spot last meeting. I don't, unless she maybe signed in as someone else, I don't see her. And we were going to go in alphabetical order. So Krupa, would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I'm going to share my screen, so hold on a second. Everyone.
All right, we ready? All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Sorry, folks, there are a few other people who are having some difficulties joining the meeting. Just wanted to admit them. Okay, let's do roll call. Shayla Demure. Krupa Desai.
Present.
Alexander Moore. Shannon Morton.
Present.
Jorge Separac. Giselle Washington.
Present.
Jonathan Wilson.
Present.
Marcus Wilson Smith.
Present.
Daniel Zamilpa.
Present.
Great. Agenda item number 4, approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I motion to approve the minutes.
I second.
Thank you. Roll call vote. Shayla Demure. Krupa Desai.
I approve. Is that what I'm doing? Approving the minutes?
Sure. You can either just say yay or nay,
Yay.
yes or no, either one.
Yes, I prefer yes.
Alexander Moore. Shannon Morton.
Yes.
Jorge Separac. Giselle Washington.
Yes, approved.
Jonathan Wilson.
Approve.
Marcus Wilson Smith.
Here.
Daniel Zamilpa.
Yes.
Great. Agenda item number 5, public comment. I didn't get any emails, but if there are folks on the call who are interested, I guess use the raise your hand feature or feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, we will move to agenda item number 6, where we will hear from the city's Strategic Initiatives Division regarding the city's plan to address homelessness. Let me make sure.
Thank you, Jasmine. My name is Corey Plank. I'm the manager of the city's Strategic Initiatives Division. It's our pleasure to be with you here tonight. It's our first meeting with you as the Social Justice Task Force. We're here to provide you with an overview of the city's homeless initiative and our efforts related to aging and poverty, where they intersect. Tonight, I'm joined by Elizabeth Anderson and Diane Kahn-Epstein from the Strategic Initiatives Division, and we'll be presenting highlights from the 2021 progress update on the city's 5-year plan to address homelessness. The plan that the city created in 2016 provides a strategic framework that helps us make sure that we're providing the services, the programs, and looking at policies to help us most effectively address homelessness. And while the city's homeless initiative was created 5 years ago, it's important to know that the city's been addressing issues related to affordable housing, housing insecurity, and homelessness for more than 35 years. We have a lot of information to share with you tonight, so we hope you'll bear with us, and we'll be happy to answer any of your questions following the presentation. And with that, I'm going to stop and turn it over to Elizabeth Anderson.
Great. Thanks so much, Corey, and good evening to the members of the Social Justice Task Force and members of the public who are watching tonight. We are glad to be here to provide a primer on the West Hollywood Homeless Initiative and 5-year plan, and then we'll be jumping into a look at the highlights from the 2021 progress update. Our goal today is to give you a big picture look at how the city and community and its partners are addressing homelessness. We hope you'll feel a sense of pride about the work going on across the community and the city, and it'll strengthen your understanding of how all the puzzle pieces fit together to create forward momentum for the city's homeless initiative. Great. So at its core, the West Hollywood Homeless Initiative is a multidisciplinary, multi-agency collaborative response to address homelessness. It's beyond the city by itself because the causes and solutions to the issue are so complex. Through the coordination, the initiative is able to advance the concepts that are on this slide, and I'll go ahead and read them in case anyone does not have visual access on Zoom, which is to be an informed and engaged community addressing homelessness, that we're connecting people to services that lead to housing, that we are preventing people from becoming homeless, and that we're responding to the community impacts of homelessness. Another important part of the initiative, and it's really the why the city invests time and effort into a local strategy, is because it provides a framework to organize complicated work, and it breaks down the steps to reach our goals. Creating the initiative in 2016 was through council leadership and community support. This group has also shaped the 5-year plan to address homelessness in our community to carry the city forward through 2023. So to keep track of the city's progress, we post the 5-year plan and progress reports at weho.org/homeless. This is the web page that you can send interested community members to if they're asking about services or how they could help be part of solutions to end homelessness here in West Hollywood and throughout the region. So next, let's look at the 5-year plan. The main question is, if we reach our 7 goals, what will be different at the end of 2023? And here's the answer. The West Hollywood community will be even better at supporting and responding to persons experiencing homelessness. We'll have created more homeless service locations and housing choices. We will have prevented homelessness among residents, and we'll have built stronger partnerships to support local and regional solutions to homelessness. So next, we'll take a look at the progress in the past year to reach each of these goals. First up, so what does it look like when the community gets even better at supporting and responding to people experiencing homelessness? Here are examples from the past year, and I'll expand on the starred items. The City Council Subcommittee on Homelessness began meeting monthly, showing the interest and commitment of elected officials in creating space to collaborate directly with staff and to study solutions to addressing homelessness and to create recommendations for their council colleagues on the path forward. Next up, hopefully you've seen the Real Change donation parking meters around West Hollywood. Even with pedestrian and car traffic down over the past year, the community donated $325 in the meters, adding on to the over $1,000 already collected, along with the $20,000 that came through City Council's decision to share parking meter revenue collected in past holiday seasons. All of these funds come through the parking division and then are put to use to buy hygiene supplies that are given to people experiencing homelessness by contracted agencies and the sheriff's mental evaluation team. Here we'll also highlight how the city's parking services division is getting even better at responding effectively to people experiencing homelessness. When the parking enforcement team has a hunch that a person getting a parking ticket is living in their car, the team requests a visit by the city's homeless outreach providers. The goal here is to connect the person to services and prevent the car from being towed. And finally, another big picture activity started this past year by the Social Services Division with direction from City Council is the study of social service needs of West Hollywood community members of color. This directly links to the homeless initiative because people of color disproportionately experience homelessness. The findings from this study will be incorporated into the next social services request for proposals in 2022. Details on the other items from this slide can be found in the 2021 progress update. All right. So I just mentioned a few highlights so far, and there's more to come in this presentation, but we're going to create an opportunity right now for attendees at the meeting to be part of the next progress update by taking a moment to reinforce how we as a city are conveying respect to people experiencing homelessness through the words we use. We'll tune into a short clip from the city's partner, United Way, and their Everyone In grassroots campaign to end homelessness. Hopefully this works, so stand by. 1 second here. Is that still sharing? Did that Are you seeing let's get started? Okay, stand by for 1 second here. All right. Now is it showing let's get started? Yeah, okay. And let me know if the sound works as well. No.
Can't hear it.
Okay. So this may be beyond my technological capacity at this point.
View options. You have to go to share sound and view options on the top of your screen in the Zoom.
Okay. Share sound. Thank you for the guidance. Okay. Let me know.
We know that in addition to framing our message, we really have to be conscientious about the language that we use when it comes to having conversations around homelessness. And that's because words matter. We know that a lot of the language that we're used to hearing in the context of even compassionate conversations or coming from people who are advocating for solutions, that language has been really dehumanizing. And it often portrays homelessness as a character defect or a permanent condition, and can talk about our unhoused neighbors as strangers or other. Because our language has the power to influence hearts and minds, we really, really want to think about how we can evolve our language to be more humanizing, more empathetic, and to really help think about the way that we see our unhoused neighbors as just that, neighbors, not strangers. So I offer you this. Instead of calling people who are unhoused the homeless, talk about the unhoused or people who are experiencing homelessness. Instead of saying drug addicts, talk about people with substance use disorders. Now, there's a lot more that we can talk about when it comes to messaging, so I encourage you to stick with us, watch the rest of the series, or go online to everyoneinla.org/events and visit our events calendar, where you'll find workshops specifically on messaging, and I hope you'll join us there.
Great, stand by and I'll flip to the other screen here. All right, so that's actually a training video now. We have been able to share with 2 commissions, the Social Justice Task Force, and all of city staff. And it's part of a really great series of videos from United Way that can be really valuable in learning more about homelessness and ways to advocate our way out of it. So we appreciate all the work that United Way has put into creating this. So with that, we will go to the next slide. Stand by. Okay, so continuing on the theme of strengthening the community's ability to support and respond to homelessness, this slide provides an overview of the services here in City of West Hollywood. Funding from the city empowers local nonprofit organizations to provide street outreach, case management, and housing retention services for homeless community members. Agency staff work directly with people experiencing homelessness to connect them to shelter, substance abuse treatment, healthcare, mental health services, and housing opportunities. The outreach teams also provide assistance in the form of food, hygiene kits, blankets, socks, and other emergency supplies. Outreach services are provided in the city 7 days a week, including some early morning, night, and weekend hours. Outreach teams also follow up on calls to the West Hollywood Homeless Concern Line when community members call in sharing information about people who need support. To help community members who are experiencing homelessness, the outreach teams have to be highly collaborative. Outreach staff work directly on the streets of West Hollywood and with local business owners, housed and unhoused community members, regional partners, and community services like the LA County Library, the Sheriff's Department, and many more to engage and assess individuals in need of service. Agency staff work to build relationships with our unhoused neighbors and meet on a weekly basis with other partner organizations to case conference and collaborate on how to best serve each person's specific needs. In addition, the city's quarterly homeless collaborative meetings provide a space for outreach staff to connect regularly and discuss resources. These collaborative efforts keep the city's service providers in close contact, helping to ensure that clients can be easily connected to the entire range of social services provided by the City of West Hollywood. In addition, many of West Hollywood's contracted agency partners provide targeted services to people experiencing homelessness with unique needs, including youth, people who are LGBT, those with mental health or substance abuse conditions, and individuals who are at risk or currently living with HIV. Two of our primary homeless service agencies that contract with the city are Essentia and Step Up on Second. Both organizations provide comprehensive services for homeless community members, including street outreach, case management, and housing retention. Essentia is also the city's shelter provider, and Step Up on Second provides programs and services with a specific focus on individuals experiencing long-term homelessness, substance use, and mental health conditions. Housing Works' mobile integrated services team also does street-based outreach with chronically homeless individuals and assists them in applying for, locating, and moving into permanent supportive housing. Once placed, the Housing Works staff continue to work with these individuals to ensure they receive support that's necessary to remain housed. Multiple teams from the LA LGBT Center support community members who are experiencing homelessness as well, including the Transgender Economic Empowerment Project, the Mental Health Services Program, and Youth Services, which provides shelter beds to youth experiencing homelessness age 18 to 24. Additional services for trans, gender nonconforming, and intersex people are provided by the Trans Latina Coalition and Trans Can Work. Trans Latina's case managers connect clients to a wide variety of services, including temporary and permanent housing and job training, while Trans Can Work provides career services for gender diverse people who are both housed and unhoused. For individuals struggling with substance use, Tarzana Treatment Center provides inpatient medical detox services and inpatient treatment. Friends Research Institute also supports substance use treatment for gay and bisexual men, including those who are unhoused. In addition, their outreach team is on the street regularly to provide HIV and AIDS education to gay, bisexual, and transgender people. APLA Health is also engaging homeless community members living with or at risk of HIV through their weekly outreach. Their HIV specialist connects individuals on the street with a wide range of services, including benefits advocacy and case management. And lastly, although not a contracted nonprofit, the city funds also support the West Hollywood Sheriff's Mental Evaluation Team, dubbed MET. MET specializes in serving individuals experiencing a mental health crisis with the goal of diverting their path from the criminal justice system into behavioral health services and housing. The MET unit coordinates with the city's strategic initiatives and social services division, as well as city contracted agencies like Step Up, Essentia, and the LA LGBT Center. The goal is to connect people to services. Additionally, MET helps to prevent homelessness among West Hollywood's residents who are impacted by mental health symptoms, and among the older adult population can also include cognitive decline due to dementia. And next, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Diane.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
From here.
Thank you. Good evening, task force members, staff. Now that Elizabeth has highlighted the programs provided by our nonprofit partners, I'm sure the question many of you may be asking is, what results are we receiving from all of these services? This slide speaks to the effective response of the West Hollywood community of contracted agencies with 4 key indicators that focus on preventing and ending homelessness. Homeless prevention through rental assistance, which was greatly expanded by the City Council during the COVID-19 pandemic, has reached 1,354 households since October 2016. I'll go over some of those numbers in more detail in a few minutes. In that same time period, 378 people, both housed and unhoused, accessed substance abuse treatment services through the city's providers. Both Essentia and the LA LGBT Center have provided West Hollywood community members experiencing homelessness with over 25,000 total nights in shelter. and 161 individuals have been placed into housing, with 78 of those placements happening during the COVID-19 pandemic. To give you some context of those numbers, the West Hollywood homeless population was estimated to be about 112 people in the official homeless count conducted by the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority in January of 2020. While we understand that West Hollywood's homeless population ebbs and flows given the city's unique boundaries and the fact that more people in the Los Angeles region are falling into homelessness every day, the city-funded agencies were able to house 161 individuals in that time period is significant, especially given the impacts of COVID-19, which greatly altered every aspect of service delivery, from outreach to case management and housing placement. All of these services and many more contribute to successfully ending the experiences of homelessness for West Hollywood community members and keeping residents in their homes. Next, we'll talk through the prior year's progress towards increasing access to services, housing, and preventing homelessness among community members. We know that a big part of ending homelessness is creating more opportunities to connect with services and places to live. This slide provides some additional details regarding how the city is seeking to achieve that goal. The city recently selected a consultant to conduct a feasibility study of locations within city limits to place a homeless service access center, along with interim housing and permanent supportive housing. The consultant will receive guidance from multiple city departments, contracted homeless service agencies, the city council, commissions, boards, and the Chamber of Congress, as well as the broader community, to produce a set of recommendations on how to move these major community assets forward. In addition, one of the city's contracted agency partners, Tarzana Treatment Center, completed an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, with West Hollywood Sheriff Station this year to provide opportunities for those charged with issues related to substance abuse to access treatment programs. The Jail in Reach program provides a needed service for housed and unhoused community members alike, creating a pathway for diversion from the criminal justice system into needed treatment. We also want to give a big shout out to our Rent Stabilization and Housing Division for their work promoting the Lease Up program, an initiative that partners with property owners and managers to connect people experiencing homelessness with housing vacancies and help people at risk of homelessness stay housed. Rent Stabilization and Housing has also been overseeing the city's Affordable Trust Fund, which the City Council has utilized to allocate $11.34 million towards building 90 units of affordable housing in the last year. On the next slide, now that we've highlighted the need for housing and supportive services to end homelessness, we'll look at the work to prevent residents from becoming homeless in the first place. This effort is one of the most crucial locally and for the region because keeping people in their housing is essential to ending the homeless crisis. There are several specific ways the city has been working on prevention, especially during the pandemic. First, the city provided emergency funding for additional nutritional and rental assistance. 70,000 meals and packaged groceries were provided to community members who needed them, and contracts with two of our nonprofit partners, National Council of Jewish Women and Alliance for Housing and Healing, were increased to offer more rental assistance. Earlier, I mentioned the 1,300 plus households that received cash since 2016 to help them pay for rent. As you might expect, the need for rental assistance during the pandemic rose dramatically. More than 1.5 million of city dollars was used to provide rental support to 600 households to keep people housed. That means that half of the total rental assistance provided by the city over the past 4 years was allocated in the last year alone. The city also worked to connect people with county and state rental assistance resources. This financial support helped vulnerable community members pay rent and stay housed. In addition to providing financial support, educating community members about laws and emergency orders created in response to COVID-19 has also been vital to keep people in their homes. The city's Rent Stabilization and Housing Division, in partnership with the Communications Department, educated residents about the state law that requires third-party checks to be accepted for rent payments, as this is how the city's programs through NCJW and the Alliance for Housing and Healing operate. Rent Stabilization, Housing, and Communication also disseminated information that helped people understand the state, county, and city eviction moratoriums that have been in place due to COVID-19. This information was updated as recently as a couple of weeks ago. Finally, the city also expanded the legal services previously offered through our nonprofit partner, BetSetic, which means House of Justice, to include a specialized eviction prevention and defense program to residents to defend against illegal evictions during the pandemic. Again, helping tenants understand their rights and offering legal support when needed helped keep residents from becoming homeless. The next slide. The last element that we will look at is how the city continues to cultivate stronger partnerships and support regional and local solutions to homelessness. As you're probably aware, the Los Angeles County Homeless Initiative and Measure H sales tax revenue funds regional homeless services, and the county shares some of these funds with cities. West Hollywood worked to secure funds to advance local priorities, including the Emergency Rental Assistance Program and emergency personal protective equipment purchases. Our strategic initiatives colleague, Jenny Ivanova, worked closely with the county to obtain funding, purchase thousands of masks and hand sanitizers, and coordinated distribution with the city's outreach teams so the teams could then get these supplies into the hands of our unhoused community members. The city also utilized county funds to pay for the consulting services to determine where we should create sites for homeless services and more housing choices. Lastly, and we know this is a lot of information that we've put forward, the city has long been committed to supporting our most vulnerable community members through affordable housing and a comprehensive continuum of services. Now, the development of a guaranteed income pilot is another way to address the financial burdens faced by some of our community members. Guaranteed income programs provide regular cash payments to participants, no strings attached, to address their most urgent needs and strengthen their financial safety net. Looking at the city's history, local data from the 2019 West Hollywood Community Study, and national research, LGBT older adults are often at greater financial risk than their non-LGBT peers due to disparities in earnings, employment, and marriage equality. Our first West Hollywood Guaranteed Income pilot, of hopefully many other pilots to come, is a poverty reduction intervention for some community members who struggle with financial security. It will be both the first LGBTQIA focused and the first older adult focused guaranteed income pilot anywhere in the country, and will provide 25 LGBTQIA older adults living on a low income with $1,000 a month for 18 months. Just as providing rental assistance to residents was vital during the pandemic to keep residents in their homes, one of the goals of the pilot would be to help provide financial support to those on a limited income to keep them housed and able to age in place. The last slide. So hopefully this presentation gives you the highlights on the progress this year happening across the city departments and divisions. We hope you learned something new and walk away with the feeling that West Hollywood is committed to making short and long-term solutions to end homelessness. This slide shows you how to learn more and stay connected with all the work happening in the community to advance the West Hollywood Homeless Initiative and the 5-year plan to address homelessness. Thank you for your time, and we welcome your thoughts and questions.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Awesome. Thank you so much. My name is Daniel Zumpa. My pronouns are he, him. Thank you so much for all of that information. I think that a lot of the information shared is often not something that most West Hollywood residents, patrons often know that is going on. You know, there's so many organizations that are working together. I think one question that I have is, you know, from an everyday perspective, you know, I live up near Sunset. I often see there are several, you know, people experiencing homelessness who are often in the same areas. You know, as a resident, obviously as someone on this committee, what is the process? What is the best way to directly help people who I see are experiencing homelessness?
I'll jump in here. And first of all, just thank you for noticing the folks who are out there and kind of their place in the city. There are a few folks throughout the city who have specific areas that they consider their kind of home base. So there's a couple of things. One is you can communicate directly with our team, and I'll make sure Jasmine has all of our information to follow up with people. And then we have it's a non-emergency number, but we have a homeless concern line. So it is exactly what you're talking about. I see somebody out there. I don't know if anybody's talking to them. I want to make sure somebody is. I just want to let you know it's a non-emergency number, but it's 323-848-6590. And we'll put that screen back up and share that with everyone again. That lets us, the city staff, kind of triage, or based on the information you share, kind of determine which agency is the best to respond. There are folks that have been in the community for a long time. There's the number. There are folks that have been in the community a long time, but I would guess, and up on Sunset, there's a couple of folks that we know who've been there for a while. They are being outreached to, they are being offered services. Some of them have availed themselves of services in the past, but haven't been able to stay either in shelter or housing to date. And so I know in some communities, people say, you know, they're service resistant or they're not willing. We like to add yet. They're service resistant so far, or they're not willing yet. But our teams continue to do that outreach. And in some cases, we've asked the teams to kind of give us a ballpark. How many times do you have to talk to somebody from the first interaction you have until they're housed? And it can be anywhere from 14, which would be ideal and great, to over 150 contacts before somebody is willing to build the trust, make the steps necessary to get into housing. And so it's as much as it's frustrating to see people from a resident's perspective, it's frustrating for us and the agencies as well. And they will just continue. We have great teams. The city is a contract city, as most of you know, and so we have these great teams that we contract with. They are as tenacious as any teams we've ever had at this point. We've got really great teams. And so they will continue to try to do that work. But you can always call us and call that homeless concern line to let us know that there's somebody you're concerned about.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I believe I saw Jonathan and then Krupa.
Thank you, Jasmine. Jonathan Wilson here. Just out of curiosity, I want to know, how are we partnering with our neighboring cities? Because a lot of the times, right, so people experiencing homelessness aren't necessarily confined to different boundaries, right? So, I mean, how are we ensuring that we're partnering with our neighboring cities effectively and we're all on the same page?
I think we're not always on the same page. And West Hollywood's a little different in some of the ways that we do things. We really try to make sure, you know, if somebody's over on this side of La Brea for part of the day, but they're over here on our side, you know, for a good chunk of the day, we're going to try to make sure they're in service. And we're not going to say you need to be served by City of LA. So that's different, I think, from our standpoint. But fundamentally, we work closely on our other border with Beverly Hills, Santa Monica, Culver City. We're part of the West Side City Council of Governments, and we have a homeless working group that's made up of staff from all those jurisdictions. So we work really closely with them in that way. Our staff, Elizabeth and Diane and myself, all have relationships with the staff in those cities and communicate pretty frequently. City of LA is harder because we're on three sides. There's a couple of council districts. It's challenging, but we've been doing more work with the Central Hollywood Neighborhood Council and sharing information and resources with them. We do have, there's back and forth. Some of our agencies, while they have a contract with West Hollywood and serve our community members, they also have teams that serve the Hollywood area. And so the folks that do move back and forth, a lot of our house residents don't know exactly where the borders are. So, it's certainly understandable that our unhoused community members wouldn't necessarily know where the borders are either. And so the folks that go back and forth, they will just make determinations with those teams. Is this, a West Hollywood person? Is this a City of LA person? But they'll get service either way. But we're in frequent contact with the other cities.
Sorry, quick follow. How does that impact like our count or our numbers in terms of how we're addressing the homeless problem though?
The point in time count is done by the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority once a year. It didn't happen in early 2021. Our last count was January 2020, just before everything shut down. It's done at about 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock, we're out doing that count. People are still moving around in West Hollywood. We're still active at 8 and 9 o'clock. And so, it's our best shot at that count. And we use our outreach teams, we use sheriffs, we use volunteers who are familiar with the area, who can kind of get a better sense of, yes, that person, we know that person. And so we try to have as accurate a count as we can. There's two things that happen though with that count. LASA has what they call multipliers. And so we know if somebody's counted in a car for West Hollywood, it's typically one person. If there's somebody in a tent, it's typically one person, sometimes two. But they use multipliers where they'll say, in the car, that counts as 1.8. Or, in a tent, it counts 2.3, for example. So that throws us off sometimes more than the region. What we also look at is we do a monthly count with Essentia. So they go out on the last Friday of every month, and they go between 5 and 7 a.m. and they do a count so they can see kind of who really spent the night here. People are generally still, bedded down, and so they'll kind of get a sense of what that looks like. That number is lower than the point in time count, pretty consistent, well, completely consistently, that number is lower. But people do move back and forth, and there are certain months of the year, it seems like we have more folks that are maybe moving through, but it's certainly something we pay attention to. But that point in time count is just that. It's that one time a year count, but we really look at those monthly counts as another way to kind of inform us where people are. And we haven't met yet, Jonathan, but thank you for the tech tip as well.
Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Krupa Desai, pronouns she, her, hers. First off, just thank you for the time, the work, the dedication to this issue in West Hollywood. Really grateful to have so much of this illuminated. Kind of taking sort of the conversation that we just had forward, one thing I was having trouble with in the presentation was wrapping my head around like the numbers and what does this really mean in terms of where we are and what progress we're making. So I saw some tremendous inputs and efforts and outreach that's happening, right? But I'm having a hard time figuring out with those monthly counts, how are we doing, right? Like, how are we doing, practically speaking, in reducing the number of people experiencing homelessness in West Hollywood? And how does, maybe I should just leave it there. Like, that's sort of like the big question for me.
I'll respond to part of that, and then Elizabeth, Diane, feel free to jump in on this one as well. We're doing a good job in terms of, if you say, here's our 112 count for 2020, and in the last 18 months we have 68 people. That's really good. It's the inflow of new people into homelessness, not just people who are falling into homelessness in West Hollywood. We've been doing a lot of work to try to prevent that through rental assistance and eviction moratoriums. But people come to West Hollywood from all over the country. It's a beacon particularly for LGBT youth to come here, and they often come without a good plan or without support. And so that is, that's always a challenge. One of the numbers that we got from LASA was on average, every day in LA County, 207 people exit homelessness, but 227 people enter homelessness. So we haven't been able to keep up, as has neither the region either. been able to keep up with that inflow of people newly entering homelessness. And that's why those, rental eviction moratoriums were so important. Rental assistance is so vital because it's a lot more effective, cost effective, and just, the impact on people who are being impacted to keep people in their current housing rather than to allow them to fall into homelessness and then try to kind of work through the system and find new housing. So that's one of the things that I think is really important for us to continue to invest in, those prevention measures as well. But Elizabeth and Diane, feel free to jump in if there's more you want to share.
There's a lot of work also that the agencies that we mentioned, and we know there's a lot of them, and that that this is a lot of information. And if you want to look on the website, if you have time, it'll break it down in our updates. And feel free to follow up with us as well, or let us know you need more information. But the agencies with whom we work are also spending a lot of time keeping people housed, not just the rental assistance money that we're talking about or providing support, but for example, working with acclimating to being housed, and also providing support, making sure people get to AA meetings or substance abuse support, or if they are need negotiation with a landlord and trying to understand what the hurdles are that they're facing and to be patient with the situation. So there's a lot of layers to both helping people become housed and then helping people stay housed.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Shannon.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your work. I just had a few specific questions on some bullet points. So at the top, we started with you had $20,000, then $1,000, and these parking meters, you earn an extra $345, and those went specifically to hygiene kits or other things. Is that what I heard? They went to hygiene kits?
The parking meter revenue, so there's two ways that there's meter revenue. One is the donation station meters that Elizabeth mentioned, and people can make donations in those 4 meters that are located throughout the city. And then we've had very, gratefully, a couple of times the council has said during the December holiday between Christmas and New Year, so the last week of December, that they would allocate 10% of all parking meter revenues to homeless services. And we've used those funds, all of those funds, for emergency supplies. And so some of that's been hygiene kits, it's been sleeping bags, socks, hand sanitizers, masks. In the last year and a half, it's been a lot of masks. So any number of those things, water, food, things for the outreach teams to use, and for the specific MET team and COPS team from the sheriff station to use to give to people, again, to start to have some engagement, to start to build trust, and fundamentally to try to help people protect themselves who are on the street. When the stay-at-home orders were issued, we have people who had no home to isolate in or to stay home in. So those were important investments that we made to make sure people could be as safe as possible.
Awesome. I was just wondering if you guys ever thought about, hygiene kits and all that stuff is necessary and it's great. With your resources, I feel like you could probably think about more creative ways, like maybe a weekly mobile shower truck. What about, you mentioned food, which was nice because I didn't see anything about hunger and food insecurity in there, which I think is a big one. Or like maybe a West Hollywood fridge. I remember I brought that up before, but I think those would be other ways to utilize your resources. Also, here I wrote down $300,000 for a homeless service and housing site feasibility study. What was the specific outcome of that study? Is there a site going up? How fast will it be able to house all 112 people?
So I'll try to take some of those, and then I'll pass some of these on. So definitely, we want to look at the hygiene services, and we have shower programs available for folks at two of our agencies, at Saban Community Clinics and at the LA LGBT Center. And the goal is, the shower trucks have some use and some benefit. What we are also always striving to do is get people connected to the agency. So if you go for the shower program, maybe you'll be comfortable to access healthcare at Saban, or you'll talk to a case manager at the LGBT Center. So we do try to get people to access those programs. And then in terms of the feasibility study, that is something we've just kicked off. We've selected the consultant. We've already had the initial meetings with them. Our goal is as fast as possible that we can look at siting, where this facility might go, or if there's an existing building that could be renovated to meet these needs. But we certainly want to look at a few different things. We know if we get any, land is really valuable in West Hollywood. If we get a parcel of land that we get to work with, we want to do more than one thing with that. We've been engaged in really, I think, more really intensive and in-depth conversations with our outreach teams over the last several months, starting last summer, about equity in service delivery and what the needs would be from their perspectives for our community members. So we would be looking at places that would have kind of an access center, for lack of any better terms at this point, but there would be showers, there would be laundry, there would be restrooms, there would be service providers available that people could access and walk in and receive connection to those services and avail themselves of laundry and restrooms and showers. But also there would be some interim housing. So in a different way than traditional shelters that are congregate, and we saw during COVID that those congregate sites present other challenges than just the fact that most people don't really enjoy being in congregate settings for shelter, but it also creates issues with public health. For our community, a lot of those shelters are divided male-female. For our community, that doesn't always really work when people are trans or gender nonconforming and want to have a space that feels safe. So we'll be looking at that. And then, yes, our goal is that between whatever this facility is and some of the other housing that will be coming online through other developments in West Hollywood, we hope that we would have enough units that we could house as many of our folks as are willing. So willing at this time. So, and then, there's other issues with housing in terms of fair housing and how those units, are allocated, but certainly our hope that we'll have more opportunities for people who've been experiencing homelessness in the city to be housed in the city or nearby.
That sounds good. And then for the local guaranteed initiative, that is such a great program. You're going to start with 25, and over the next 5 years, do you guys plan on expanding that, or is it 25 over 5 years?
You're talking about the guaranteed income pilot?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the goal is to start and then scale up. So it would be actually 25 people over an 18-month period of time. But we are working to look, hopefully this is going to be the first of many pilots. So we would like to both, if we had our choice, to expand this pilot as well as look at different populations that could benefit from a guaranteed income.
That'd be awesome. Awesome. Great work. Thank you.
Sorry, Danny's up here again. Just a couple of follow-up questions. The first is in regards to public health and obviously the COVID-19 pandemic. As far as vaccination services and offerings, has that been something that has been extended to our unhoused neighbors?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that, because we didn't cover that, and we'll make a note for that next time. Yes, so we had partnerships with the county and some of the nonprofit agencies that came in initially doing testing in West Hollywood in the kind of earlier days of the pandemic. And then we have been able to vaccinate. We had 2 rounds of kind of stand-up, pop-up vaccination clinics with the County Department of Health Services. And so we did vaccinate, I think, 24 folks in those 2 clinics. And then there were also clinics available at the LGBT Center where folks could access those as well. We have, the same issue that we have in the larger community, where we have some hesitancy about vaccines. And so we did try to do some work with the outreach workers and the DHS officials even if you came, some people came to hear more about the shots and decided not to be vaccinated. And some people heard what they needed to hear and went ahead and did get vaccinated. So it's going to be an ongoing effort as it is kind of in the larger community. But yes, we have been working closely with county agencies to try to make sure testing and vaccines are available to folks.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for that update. And I guess my last question is probably more for Jasmine and John. Hi, John Leonard. How are you? I know you mentioned that I believe it's a week time that the 10% of the parking meter fees are then donated to homelessness services and all that. Just out of curiosity, why is that not a consistent thing throughout the year?
So I can chime in on it a little bit. There's significant funding allocated to the city's homeless program throughout the year. Quite frankly, the parking meter amount is a pretty small amount, and it was more meant to raise awareness within the community and allow the community a way to donate. But certainly more funding for homeless services is something that we always look at, and the vast majority come from our city's general fund.
Gotcha. Okay, good to know. And then just, I guess this is more of a technical question. The donation meters that were mentioned a few times, where are those located actually?
I can speak to the one that's located outside of the library. They're purple and they're subtle, but then once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then Corey, I think the other one is like further east towards Plummer Park.
There's one by the Gateway, on the La Brea side of Gateway. There's one in Plummer Park. There's one by the library, and watch me forget the fourth one. I think it's close to Robertson on the other side of the park. So, but they're available. Those are up year round, and people have been really generous in making donations to those.
Gotcha. Sounds good. Is there an opportunity for other areas that are, more walkable? I'm thinking like Sunset Plaza is probably another good place to, maybe put one there. I'm sure outside of the Abbey is never a bad idea. But just wanted to see if that was an opportunity to extend that program, or if the 4 is kind of what's allocated for right now.
That's kind of where we are right now. I think there are other ways that people have given back. We didn't get to do it this year, which is a real bummer, because one of the really great programs we have been able to do in the past, and we hope to pick up again next year, is a clothing drive for the LGBT Center for the youth program. They had needed more kind of professional or work clothes for youth who were going out on job interviews or to sustain employment, that they needed, more clothing or more professional clothing. And the city, both city staff and the community have been really generous in those drives, and really have just really blown us away and blown the center away with the volume and the quality and everything that was donated, and just the generosity. So those are some other ways that people can give back, and we'll continue to look at those opportunities when it's safer health-wise to be able to do that. But yeah, we'll continue to make opportunities for people to get involved. And I will say, while we're here, once we really dig into this feasibility study, and we'll start having more community conversations. Now that you know more about what's happening, we'll hope that to see you all in some of those community meetings and forums, and support the efforts that we'll be making and that we'll be making with community partners for these kind of services. It's never easy to cite homeless services or homeless housing. There will be people who will say that doesn't belong here, no matter where the here is. And so I think, that's another thing that we will be looking for, is community advocates who support those services and housing.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Awesome. If there are no more questions, really big thank you to Corey, Diane, and Elizabeth. This was great.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too. Okay, let's move to agenda item number 7. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, can everyone see? Oh, can you see the action plan? Great. Okay, so the Community and Legislative Affairs team drafted this action plan based on council's direction that the Social Justice Task Force advised City Council on social and racial equity issues in the West Hollywood community and provide policy recommendations to council to address systemic racism for the city of West Hollywood. As a refresher, at the February 1st City Council meeting, Council approved the framework and guidelines for the Social Justice Task Force. Sorry, I was supposed to see it on this page. In addition to the structure of the meetings below. So this is what we will use as a roadmap to make sure we stay on task. As a brief recap, the task force has held 2 meetings so far. In the previous meetings, you all have had the opportunity to introduce yourselves to one another, to staff. You've discussed diversity, equity, and inclusion principles. You've received a presentation from the city's internal government Alliance on Race and Equity, our GEAR team. And as of tonight, you've received a presentation from the city's Strategic Initiative Division, as well as at the previous meeting, CLA staff gave a presentation on the structure of the city and its operations. So during the last task force meeting, you all expressed a desire for staff to bring forward a draft action plan. So that way the task force could begin working towards formulating policy recommendations and actionable items to bring to City Council. So this draft action plan proposed for the task force consideration. And the goal of this draft action plan is to help guide you all for the next 3 months and really help you establish priority areas to focus on. Obviously, you are more than welcome to change things, tweak things as you wish. We just wanted to provide you with some sort of a foundation to kind of start with. Over the next 3 or 4 meetings, you all will continue to hear presentations from staff or community partners, nonprofit agencies. And the presentations, just like the one this evening, will encompass the first 30 to 45 minutes of the meeting, leaving time obviously for questions and comments. But the task force should identify 1 or 2 subject area presentations for the August 24th meeting. As a quick aside, in February, our social services team provided an overview of social service utilization by community members of color to the city's Human Services Commission, as well as the Lesbian and Gay Advisory Board. So they're planning on providing an overview of service utilization by community members of color over the last 10 years. If this is something that you all are interested in, staff can coordinate and add this to the meeting on the 24th.
How do we say that we're interested?
We can either do it now, or we can kind of move on to the priority areas and then tackle the next meetings and the subject areas for the next meetings after. Okay. So that's just a quick recap of what I went over. So again, these priority areas are what staff is recommending based on the common things and the ideas and conversations we've had at previous task force meetings. So again, you all are more than welcome to add priorities to this list to delete priority areas or combine the areas as necessary. But based on these priority areas, staff is recommending that the task force establish 3 task force subcommittees. And the subcommittees will consist of 3 task force members each. Obviously, each task force member will participate in one subcommittee, but the subcommittees will be able to meet outside of the normal task force meetings. You can meet on your own, you can meet with staff, you can meet without staff, but the goal is for each subcommittee to report back to the task force on their progress at future meetings. So let me just make sure this is, can everyone still see my screen? Okay, great.
And I would add that we would certainly encourage the subcommittees to meet on their own without staff if that's their desire. But at a certain point, I think that it would be helpful to have staff involved in some of those meetings because we can help vet some of the ideas and provide feedback on the ideas, things that may be more easily feasible and some things that may be more long-term and have more hurdles to them. But ultimately, I think with these priority categories, we really want to be able to capture everything that the task force is interested in looking at. So there may be a need to combine some of these into different subcommittees. And certainly through the subcommittee's work, some things may come to the top and some things may fall off. But we really wanted to put down everything that we've heard from the task force so far and allow the task force members to add in and try to come up with 3 subcommittees so that we can start some of the more detailed work.
Feel free, go ahead, John.
How do we start? I tend to be a little more action, so I want to know, like, how do we start kind of impacting this list and move forward? Like, if I have suggestions around things that might be combined.
Yeah, I think that we can take suggestions. I mean, we can provide some suggestions too. I think that, you know, certainly easy combinations are the social services category with homelessness. A lot of the services that are provided through our social service agencies are the same ones that are provided through our strategic initiatives division that you just heard from. Certainly housing can be combined with economic and community development and even the environment. City operations is a little bit on its own. Public safety is a little bit on its own as well. But just for me, those are a few of the things that naturally occur within the same divisions and departments within the city. But I think we're open to suggestions, and I think we can all just work through trying to combine these into 3 categories.
So I just have one suggestion that basically, I guess an area that I'm somewhat passionate about. So like, I would love to combine economic community development with city operations, because I do think that there's some, it may not seem natural, but I think around the contracting, the RFPs, the business side of the house, that's the piece that I'm thinking about. And then that combined with BIPOC and women-owned businesses, as well as thinking about the residences, the BIPOC residents, that's stuff that I think about. So that's, I don't know, I just think it naturally goes together from a community development standpoint.
And I think that makes sense. I agree with that. And I think that there are certain aspects that we could even pull out of city operations and put into certain categories. So even with like the public safety category, we have our block by block officers. There are different kind of alternatives to policing that our council will even be talking about within the next month and a half. So some of those are quasi city operations related, but could be put into public safety. So even with city operations, I think that we can try to help to kind of plug those into certain places. Like you just said, Jonathan, I think that kind of the help within the community and economic development and some of the contracting from the city could easily fit together.
Daniel, I
That's a
see your
great
hand.
hand, by the way, John.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I think that this list covers off most of the things that I've had on my list for a couple months now. I guess just a couple of quick questions in terms of where this would technically fall. You know, in recognizing which Indigenous lands we are on has always continued to be a very important thing for me. And I know that we've had public speakers come in and speak about that as well. What category would that technically fall under? And just, you know, is that environment? Is that economic community development? I'm not sure technically where that falls under.
I'm not sure there's a clear-cut category that it falls under. I think it could go under economic and community development, or even within city operations, where we end up putting some of those. And that one's actually one that we've done a little bit of work on. We were given a council directive, I think maybe 4 or 5 months ago, regarding looking at that. So we can pull up some of that work. So that one can go wherever we kind of see fit with it. But we do have some background information to help guide that conversation.
Yeah, I just want to
then-
jump in really quick and just to piggyback on what John just mentioned. The council gave us direction to work on a land acknowledgement policy for the city. And we're kind of potentially going to expand a little bit, but I think what John said about having it be part of city operations would make sense, because it is something that we want to kind of formalize as part of the recognitions that we do at city council meetings and other public meetings, as well as some other potential programming and things like that. So I think that does make sense.
Gotcha, makes sense. That's great to hear. Thank you. And then the other question I have in terms of, I guess it's more legislation than anything. You know, I'm not sure what the place is, if there is a place to have conversations about decriminalizing sex work, reversing charges that were related to cannabis-related crimes within the city of West Hollywood, things like that have happened here. I don't know how that works technically. It might be a bigger conversation just with the County of Los Angeles. I don't know. Do you have any guidance there?
So I would put both of those into public safety. I think that they're the end result of public safety practices from the past. And certainly I think legislation and legislative issues could be within every category. So if there's certain legislative actions that the task force would recommend, or advocacy policies, they could be within each category. But I think the two you mentioned, Daniel, could go within public safety, because I think that public safety can be correcting wrongs that have occurred in the past, but then also looking at our public safety models moving forward.
Perfect, that's great, thank you.
Okay, so far I have Jonathan's suggestion of combining economic and community development with city operations. Were there any other ideas? Was everyone in agreement with that as potentially a priority area?
I'm open to John's suggestion too, where he was saying maybe take an extract from the city operations, which is really more around the contracting RFP piece, the business side of the house, like how they interact with, I guess, like suppliers or partners.
Okay.
Maybe that's the piece.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. That'll be a pretty significant conversation. I think that's a big chunk of the city operations that we would be looking at here. So I think that would fit in well there. And then I had mentioned, I think there's a natural nexus between the homelessness services and social services, and even potentially housing services. Housing comes with a lot of different kind of thoughts. I mean, just building more housing, but then also building affordable housing as well. So I could see a natural nexus between combining the housing and homelessness category with the social services category. That's going to be a pretty significant subcommittee. So those will be, I would say that that's a pretty full subcommittee at this point. And then if we add RFPs and city contracting into economic and community development, that's pretty full too. So, you know, if we wanted to add more into public safety or combine things with public safety, I think there's more room there just in looking at, you know, how our city operations are laid out.
Any ideas?
Yeah, I think based off of what I've continued to hear from the rest of the council, and also just from our conversation today, it kind of seems like the three are, and again, so trying to figure out which is which, or which goes into which: economic/city ops, housing, homelessness, and social services is the second, and then public safety being the third.
Okay.
But definitely open to other suggestions and comments.
And certainly these are this is our starting point for subcommittees. I think that I would guess that as the subcommittees start their work over the next month, more ideas will come up. And specifically when we have the first touch base for all the subcommittees with the task force, other ideas might come up. As we hear more presentations on a monthly basis, as we do more research, other items are going to come up, and other items may be needed to be added to the subcommittees, or we may need to think about how we work through some of those other items. But this incorporates a large amount of, I believe, what the task force will be looking at. So this is a pretty good starting point, and certainly as we start to work through things, I think it'll become more clear if there's other items that we need to add.
Marcus, I see your hand. Feel free to go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to agree that this is a really good starting point. Public safety is a beast on its own, and I agree with all these suggestions about combining the housing and economic community development along, basically with everything. But I think public safety, social services, and housing, those are great priorities to start with.
Great. So really quickly, just to reiterate, the three, or at least it sounds like the three priority areas will be economic community development, combining that with the contracts and RFP process, homelessness, housing, and social services, and then public safety. So,
and then
oh, sorry about that, John, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, and then to be clear with public safety, we'll add in a legislative component there, particularly with looking at past offenses. And if any of the other groups want to talk about legislative items, certainly free to do that. But I think just adding that extra emphasis into the public safety one, since I know that has been something that has been talked about a lot.
So if there are specific areas that you're interested in joining on the subcommittee, this is the time. Jonathan, I think I already know which one you may be leaning for. But I'll wait for you to confirm.
I would like, sorry, oh, where's my hand?
Oh, you can go ahead.
I would love to be on the economic community development task force subcommittee.
And Jasmine, maybe since we're done with the priorities, we can take the screen share down so we can see.
Oh,
and I know we can only see 6 of each other at a time. Put the screen share up. Okay.
I'm not sure the order of hands. I think it was Daniel and then maybe Shannon and then Marcus.
Sure. All of these are, of course, I'd love to be involved in everyone, but, I think for me, the first one I would say is public safety and legislation. Yeah, that's what I would go with. Thank you.
Shannon.
I would go with homelessness. and housing.
Marcus?
I'm good with public safety.
Krupa?
I also am happy to serve whenever needed. I'd probably rank public safety first, then economic and community development. And they all connect to me in my brain, so.
Okay.
Who are we missing?
I believe Giselle was on, but I don't see her now. We might have lost her.
Okay.
So yeah, Giselle, Jorge, Alexander, and Shayla aren't here, so we'll have to have them select.
So Jasmine, I think you can reach out to them and let them know which ones are available.
Question, are you allowed to do more than one? You can do up to 3?
So we considered this, and there's some difficulties with more than one, mostly because we think there will be a lot of work associated with each of the subcommittees. So our suggestion is to focus on just one at this time, since there's a lot of different subjects within each one. We considered having each task force member potentially be on 2 or have more subcommittees, but as just a numbers game, there are 9 task force members, and with 3 subcommittees and 3 people on each, it was the easiest math to work out, so that each person could be on one and there wouldn't be different numbers of people on each subcommittee. So our recommendation is 3 people and 3 subcommittees.
Okay.
We also need to avoid having a quorum on any of the subcommittees, so we have to limit the number of people that are on a subcommittee.
That is very much correct. Okay, so I think, Jasmine, do we want to talk about kind of next steps within the subcommittees?
Sure. So again, like I mentioned, you all are more than free to, I believe public safety looks like it has a full group with Daniel, Marcus, and Krupa. So far, at least as of tonight, Shannon and Jonathan are kind of braving it alone. But you're more than welcome to meet amongst each other, however often as you want. We do ask that whatever research or progress that you've made be shared at the next social justice task force meeting, just so that way everyone is aware of what's happening, what conversations are being had, and also what work is being done. And this is really going to help you all start formulating the actionable items and policy recommendations that the council is looking forward to.
And certainly staff is happy to participate in all of the meetings. It's up to the subcommittees. If the public safety subcommittee would like us to set up the first meeting, we're happy to do that. But we will leave it up to the subcommittees.
And if there's, sorry, really quickly, if there's research that you all want done, we're more than available to help with that. I'm sure we can also make sure that everyone is aware of what the city has already done in these specific areas and things that the city is working towards. So
how do we go about requesting listening mechanisms like you said, like the research that you've done, or requesting different speakers from the community Or like, do we send you a list like a week before? Like, what's the protocol?
Send me an email anytime.
Okay.
When the idea pops in your head, just feel free to send me, Andy, or John an email, so that way we can start working on that.
All right, thank you.
That was my question. Thank you.
Okay. If there aren't any other questions, I will see. We'll move to agenda item number 8, and I'll turn it over to Diane and Crystal to discuss considerations and guidance for advancing new ideas, which will help you all in formulating your policy recommendations. I'm going to actually just share my screen since I have the document.
Yeah, and I'll add in that we thought this was a very timely conversation since there's a lot of work that's going to be starting with the subcommittees. And I think that Diane and Crystal are really going to help kind of formulate kind of ways to think through some of the ideas that are going to come up during these subcommittees.
Fantastic. Thank you all. And Jasmine, thank you for sharing your screen. If you could, we are going to likewise want to share our screen as well. And as we make that transition, I just want to echo what John said. Everything that has been covered in the meeting so far really hangs together very, very well. You know, from the presentation on homelessness, and my goodness, what a tremendous model of what this looks like on the other side. Like when implemented and action is taken, what a comprehensive effort looks like. What are the many moving parts that are held in that effort? And so how do we get there? And we thought maybe our best way of supporting you would be to take a look at, from the standpoint of, if I know what the destination looks like, then that helps us in our work groups in readying ourselves to bring forward our best thoughts and recommendations that lead to that end point. And in addition to what we will just walk you through this evening, I know that Jasmine and John and the whole team are giving thought to some additional samples or examples that they can share with you, which would give you the sense of what a staff report looks like when that recommendation that comes from this group is fully packaged and ready to go to council. But we start with, how do we get there? And Crystal, I invite your voice always throughout this. And good evening, everybody. Hello, just diving right in. Good to be with you. Love what I've heard so far, and just the continuing passion and interest that this group shows up with serves the work so very well. So take a moment and take a breath and think about the fact that even before the first meeting of this task force, your brain was starting to percolate and stimulate with ideas. That the work you do in the many settings of your life have been cultivating some particular ideas and thoughts and concerns and considerations, some possibilities. Now you're part of this formal body. And in this formal body, you have been asked to be thought partners, to give deep consideration and literally grappling with some of the toughest social issues, and to be discerning in advancing a few things that you think will make a true and positive difference. So how do we get there? What is part of what constitutes that? Well, what first constitutes it is how you inform and engage each other, how you are influential and persuasive with your other task force members, how you use this group as a sounding board to ultimately create sound recommendations that are ready for the outside show. In other words, if it can pass the test inside here, you know it's got legs that are going to hold up as it is turned 360 degrees for consideration outside of the task force. That's the good thing. That's not contrary, that is quality, and it's what you do with and for one another. So it starts with, from a singular task force member to other subcommittee members. You share your vision, not just a brainstorm, but really you are able to bring forth the proposed idea. What is it? Paint the picture. Who will it serve? What are the needs or opportunities it addresses? Because sometimes there's a compelling need and this will help us respond to that. Or sometimes the moment is now to seize an opportunity and this will allow us to take advantage of that. And how would it work? Just in sharing the vision, be prepared to speak well to all 4 of these points, because that allows others to begin to more deeply understand what it is that you are proposing. Crystal, you want to talk about this part?
Sure. So when we talk about providing context after vision is shared, is finding where your vision fits within the roles and responsibilities that you all know have been charted with, you've been given, so that there's not a difference in size, right? So that you can adjust as necessary. We've worked with task force members in the past, we've worked with committees in the past, and we know that the vision can be this big. It's beyond my screen, it can be this big. And the space that it fits in can feel so narrow that when taken out of the context, it doesn't feel actionable. And so we want to make sure that to create effective change, to make sure that the conversations are effective, that we're preemptively thinking about the context that we have, right? So being very clear and explicit about the connections that this vision or this project, this idea is connected to the charter and the role of this task force. So even being as explicit as using language from the action plan, right, to elevate what it is that you're proposing. What would it require from other task force members so that people can easily sign on or have questions, right? If it's too ambiguous and people don't know what they're signing on to, you might find out later in the process that, wait, I didn't really know that that's what you meant, right? So being very clear and explicit about the requirements of other task force members, but also, like our staff members were saying today, what the requirements are for them, right? What is the ask that you have for them? If you want additional research, clearly specifying, when we heard about this thing on Tuesday in July, we need to hear more about it, right? So being specific for those needs, being clear about whether there's coordination or collaboration that needs to happen. Jonathan, you brought this point up with the question around homeless services, whether there was coordination with other cities, right? So if in the research you're elevating that, likely this will need coordination, getting that to the front end of that so it doesn't become a question later. Mm-hmm. And how is it in connection? Krupa, you also brought this up in terms of the interconnectedness of all of these subcommittees that you're forming, listening from each other in those subcommittee report backs
to be very keen to pick up the strong connections, the places where you are naturally aligning, so that those initiatives can move forward together.
Really helpful. And again, tonight's conversation lends itself to great examples of what that looks like when implemented. And so with that context, you will be called upon. You want to be ready to offer background. What are your sources of information, input, or data? What supports the thoughts, the actions, the priorities that you are setting forth? What prompted the need for the action now or in the immediate future? In other words, what's the case statement of why this needs to be high on the priority list and addressed in the near term versus the long term? What resources would be required? Again, going into the research that you want. And I so appreciate Jasmine and John, your comments around, turn to us, utilize us as resources. We can be helpful in those moments. After you've done some initial info gathering, you may want us to look into even more deeply some specific aspects of this to identify the types of resources that are necessary and whose authorization is required. In some cases, while you may be advancing this recommendation to council, it may require council's authorization, or maybe a regional authority or a state entity is associated with it. Looking at that previous element, thinking about who else are the key players, also answers the question, who are the authorizers? Because sometimes it's multiple. So we just wanted to bring forward that as you go to work in your subcommittees, that you are taking on this work in such a robust way that we don't want it to be a gotcha experience, that after you've invested great discussion and mental energy to find out bit by bit, only after the fact that this piece is needed and this question is coming up and this background is persuaded, but actually go into it eyes wide open, knowing that, great ideas live up to all of that stuff. Those things should not diminish a great recommendation. And remember, the most challenging task is you are recommending what can be done and not organizing something that you are going to go out and do yourself. And so these are actions that are likely going to be taken up and taken on by others. And those others will be looking to you to launch that conversation, to introduce that possibility with as much information and consideration as possible, that they meet you at the start of a great idea, as opposed to having to take steps backwards and walk up to that point. It is what we have found to be the most effective, influential, and empowered way that task forces, boards, committees actually set the stage for courageous actions that are met with approval and partnership and implementation. So we wanted to pause and just get your thoughts and reactions to these elements, and to frame it this way. Certainly we invite any questions you have, But also what we'd like to hear from each of the task force members who are here tonight, in what way do you think these guidelines can serve you in the work ahead? In what way do you feel these guidelines can serve you in the work ahead? And Daniel, I see your hand. Thank you for getting us rolling.
Of course, no, thank you for putting this together. I kind of laugh reading these because I work in marketing creative and I deal with briefs all day, every day. And these are so many of the questions that I have of myself, of my team. So I appreciate you putting this together. And I actually want to take a look at my briefs internally and cross-reference with this document to see that I got everything. But I think the questions that you put together are all the right questions. It not only makes it asks of ourselves, but I think adding the staff city element to it as well is, so much of us operate from a place of what we've experienced in our own lives. And while I think we're all here with the right intentions, and I think we're human, we might overlook some elements. And I think that this keeps us accountable, and super excited to be using this.
I love it. And thank you for evoking the notion that these guidelines are not intended to stifle the creative, but up the ante in terms of the robust engagement of any creative thought. Wonderful. Thank you, Daniel. Who's ready? Oh, I see you, Marcus. Marcus is ready.
I agree with Daniel. I think it lays out clarity, transparency, a lot of what we talked about in the beginning, and I think it's wonderful. It gives us a great slate to start with.
Love it. I would love to just be in the room as a listener as you all take this on. Excited about it already. All right.
It's like Shannon is ready.
Shannon, we're ready for you.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, thank you so much for putting this together. I think it's a great template, especially for someone. I've never been on a committee like this before, so I think I'm going to find it very useful. And I think as well, to piggyback off of Daniel, the first set of questions really help you think about, or not just think about yourself, but thinking outside of yourself. And that's what this is kind of all about anyway, how we can help our neighbors. So thank you for your template.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. And who is the next person? I think I've got the wrong format to see hands well.
I'm happy to jump in.
All right.
I'm sorry, John. You actually raised your hand. Should I?
Go ahead, Krupa. Jonathan, I think, is being very gracious.
Anyway, sorry, I was holding back only because had been said and wasn't sure I had much to add. I think it's very centering and very anchoring in what our charge is. And to that extent, I think it's really helpful.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you for that. And Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you. No, Krupa, I was letting you go. Sorry, I didn't mean to. No, but in terms of what you've outlined, I think it makes a lot of sense. Because you want to think about ultimately what the vision is. Where do we want to be at the end of this so we can see the road ahead? And I keep thinking about what are the main objectives that will help us get to that vision. And then the other key pieces, then, what keeps coming to my head is S-bar, but I don't want to say that, but I just said it. So
it's out there now, Jonathan.
Out there now, right? But that's kind of where my head's at right now. So thank you for your guidance. I think it's exactly right.
Fantastic. I am so encouraged that this lives in a good place with you all, because I think the structure of subcommittees lends itself to taking on multiple complex things at the same time, and yet to make a difference in the areas of social justice, of racial equity, is exactly that, to hold multiple complex components simultaneously and not be stifled by them, but rather to say, what then will make a meaningful difference in moving barriers and enhancing equity? What is going to get the job done from our standpoint? And that is the valuable work that shows up in a refined and clarified way when you go at it through the subcommittee structure and through these lenses. And so, having heard the presentation from the wonderful team who are taking on with gusto, homeless services, and having looked at the work plan and the way you all have organized yourself to look at some vital and important areas with these guidelines, my last ask of you before we yield our time back is there anything else you need that will position you for support and success as you launch into your subcommittee working process? Is there anything else you can think of at this moment that will be helpful to you as you launch into subcommittee work, feeling supported and positioned for success?
I have a question. In terms of how we communicate with the public and getting, our constituents' opinions and values, like how do we do that? What is the process? Is it running a Google form, Facebook ad? Is it, I'm not sure what the process is for that, what's acceptable and what's not.
Yeah, I'm gonna toss this one to staff, but if I'm hearing your question correctly, it's like if we wanted to get input from the public, is that a listening session? Is that a review and comment period? What are our options? How does that work? Okay, I'm handing that to staff who knows far better than me what your options are.
So there will be different options. I think at the beginning, the task force members can certainly reach out to individuals they know in the community. You're allowed to have conversations out in the community. If there's an individual or a group you'd like to meet with as a task or as a subcommittee, you can do that. I think more larger surveys or solicitations of information from a larger group, we should do that as a larger task force. And maybe that's something that we look at when we return either at the next meeting or the meeting after, when we have some more kind of formal policies that the task force is discussing together. Maybe that could be a step after that, where we actually do a survey or we put out some sort of a listening component from the community. But I think that the smaller informal conversations are definitely something that the subcommittee have. The larger outreach we should probably do as a task force as a whole, and maybe we do that after the next couple of meetings.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan, I saw your hand.
Yeah, from a timeline perspective, I just want to make sure I'm trying to figure this out. So October is when we're planning on giving an update to the council. Is that confirmed? If that's the case, does that mean that we should have a good sense of what problems we're trying to solve by then? Or do we need to have a preliminary action plan by then? Like, what do we need to have ready to have an effective update for them?
So I would first start by saying this is the first update. And so this is an update of the first, essentially it'll be 4 meetings. So I think that just a progress update is sufficient for the council at that point. If we have we will certainly have areas that we're looking at. I think we might even have some initial policy areas that we are looking at, and then certainly the action plan moving forward for the next 9 months or so. But this is really the first update. So I think this is just to let the council know that the task force is doing work, this is what they've accomplished, and these are the categories that they are starting to look at.
Thanks, John.
Mm-hmm.
Great, two good questions to get us started. Any other questions around what would be helpful in ensuring you are supported and positioned for success?
I guess one quick follow-up question to Jonathan's is if there's any proper documentation formatting or how things are presented traditionally within the city, if any like templates or anything like that are available, that would be wonderful. If not, I'm sure we can whip up a Google Slides, but anything that you may have would be incredibly helpful.
There's not really any specific templates. I think that once we actually get to the point of that we're going back to council with an update, and certainly once we have final policy recommendations for council at the end of the task force, it will go into our standard formats of staff report and presentations. But within the task force itself and within the subcommittees, you are open to the type of format that just feels right for that discussion.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And here's just a quick follow-up question I have. How will we ensure our task force members who were not able to attend tonight get grounded as well? I know you'll reach out and find out where their interest is by way of subcommittee sign up. I think we would also, wonder, okay, how can we make sure they too are on board with what we've covered this evening?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll make sure to provide a recap for them, especially as it relates to the subcommittees. So yeah.
And this is also being recorded, so we can provide a recording to the task force members that weren't present.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, well,
Sorry, just to follow up to that. Jasmine, should I pause on sending any notes until I hear, maybe wait a week or something so we can hear back? Because I would love to have influence or thoughts from other people incorporated. But I have a lot of ideas already. But I think I should probably back off a little bit and slow my roll. Do you think a week is a good time frame, or do you what's your recommendation?
I think so. I'll let John confirm.
Yeah, I think that works. I think that Jasmine will reach out tomorrow to the other 4 task force members to get them assigned to specific subcommittees. And I would say that if there's a couple of general things that you would like us to look into, or you have general questions, you can send those over and we can start to research those and provide information.
Awesome, great, thank you.
Kind of a similar tactical question, just, because there are 3 of us right now in public safety, is there a way for you all to tee us up on the same email? I don't even know if we have each other's emails, or to sort of like kick that off and send like any initial, like, here are some resources that have already, I know you mentioned it, but I'm wondering if we need to just say.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. I can easily send out emails pertaining to the specific priority area to those subcommittee members. But just as a reminder, when I send emails out to all of you, I blind copy everyone, just so that way we don't run into a situation where multiple people are responding to something that the task force will hear at a future meeting. So yes, to answer your question, but that's not a problem.
Thanks, Jasmine.
Yeah, once each of the task forces is established, or once each of the subcommittees is established and we have the full 3 members, I think Jasmine can send out an email connecting everybody, including the documents that we had tonight, and then even suggesting Jasmine could work to set up the initial meeting too of the subcommittee if that's a desire of the subcommittee. And staff can attend if there's any specific data or research that you think about in that first meeting that you want us to pull.
Fantastic. Well, with that, I am going to hand it back to staff, and thank you all for great engagement and readiness. I just feel like you are ready to dive right into this wonderful work. Back to you.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Crystal. Okay, agenda item number 9, election of a chair. So I did want to let you all know that we are missing 4 members tonight. So it's up to you whether you're more than welcome to continue with the election of a chair. We have it agendized, so it's not a problem. But if there's consensus about tabling this to the next meeting, that's an option as well.
I motion we table.
I second. But I do have a couple follow-up questions in terms of the chair, their responsibilities, the commitment. What does that look like?
So essentially everything that I've been doing in terms of running the meeting, I'm still going to be the person handling sending out updates and emails to folks and being that staff liaison in that capacity. But the chair will be calling the meeting to order, going through the agenda, running the meeting, essentially. There may be opportunities too where the chair is either asked to attend other commissions or advisory boards on behalf of the task force. Obviously, all of you are welcome to, but the chair will be that point person. The main responsibility is running the meeting.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So I believe there was a motion by Jonathan to table. Was there a second?
Yeah,
I second.
From, yeah.
Sorry, Shannon or Daniel?
Shannon.
Okay.
Shannon, yes.
Okay.
And then do you want to do a quick roll call vote on that?
Sure. Okay, Krupa, decide.
Yes.
Shannon Morton,
Yes.
Jonathan Wilson,
Yes.
Marcus Smith,
Yes.
Daniel Zamilka.
Yes.
Great.
Can I just ask a procedural question? When is roll call necessary versus just to kind of group that?
So it's actually more of a technical point because we're doing these virtually. So if we were in person, we could do a group voice vote. Since we are doing this virtually, we have to do a roll call every time.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, agenda item number 10, items from staff. Just as a reminder, I know I mentioned it during the action plan item, but if there are areas or topics of interest that you all are interested in hearing more about, I mentioned that the social services team would be available to provide an overview of social service utilization by community members of color. If that's something that you all are interested in, please let me know. But if there are other areas, more than open to hearing those as well. And you don't have to now.
And I was just going to say, if it's the consensus of the task force, we can schedule that social services presentation for the next meeting. I think that's a pretty robust discussion. We can do social services based on all of them provided in the city, but then also based on the utilization of the members of minority communities as well.
Thank you. That would be great.
John, did you have any other updates for them?
I don't have anything else, just that we will be in contact shortly about the subcommittees. I'm happy to help the subcommittees work through their first meetings and also provide any research as necessary. We are here as a resource for you.
Great, okay. And with that, the Social Justice Task Force will adjourn to its next regular meeting on Tuesday, August 24th at 6 p.m.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Good night.
you.
Good evening, guys.
Bye.